Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going to unpack a truly fascinating, deeply personal, and structurally unique piece of historical text, the Gospel of John. Whether you approach this as a foundational theological document or just a pure piece of ancient historical literature, there is absolutely no denying its massive impact. So we're going to dive right in and explore exactly how this account was put together, who actually wrote it, and why it stands out so incredibly starkly from the other records of its time.
Right, so here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off by looking at a fundamentally different gospel, then we'll ask who was John, map out the ministry timeline, zoom in on the betrayal, death, and resurrection, and finally wrap it all up with the historical evidence.
Section 1. A fundamentally different gospel. Okay, to really set the stage here, we have to remember that Matthew, Mark, and Luke had already been circulating for over 30 years before John even sat down to write. You'd kind of think everything that needed to be said had already been documented, right? But here's where it gets wild. A staggering 90% of the material in John's account is completely unique. Think about that for a second. 90%. Almost everything you read in this text is stuff you simply won't find in the other three Gospels. He wasn't just retelling the same story. He was filling in these massive historical and personal gaps.
And the stylistic shift is just brilliant. While the other writers focus really heavily on massive public addresses and sweeping crowds, John completely pivots to intimate, one-on-one dialogues. We're getting these personal conversations with individuals, disciples and opposers alike. Even more remarkably, he focuses intensely on the concept of love, really highlighting that warm relationship between father and son. In fact, he uses the Greek words for love and to love more often than the other three gospel writers combined.
So John's perspective perfectly brackets the whole ministry. He is the only one who zooms all the way out to discuss Jesus' pre-human existence, giving us that famous line, "The Word was in the beginning with God." And then he zooms right back in to document 6 totally unrecorded miracles. This covers the whole shebang, from the very first miracle of turning water into wine at Cana, all the way to a wildly huge catch of fish right after the resurrection. Section 2. Who was John? So who exactly was the man behind this highly personalized lens? Well, interestingly enough, the author never explicitly identifies himself by name in the text itself. But by the 2nd and 3rd centuries, early readers widely attributed the book to the Apostle John. And that's a name that beautifully translates from Hebrew to mean Jehovah has shown favor or Jehovah has been gracious. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is that John wasn't just some distant observer or a secondhand historian. He was apparently among the very first disciples introduced to Jesus by John the Baptist. There's even strong evidence he might have been Jesus' own cousin. Throughout the text, he humbly refers to himself just as the disciple whom Jesus loved. I mean, this was a guy who was literally at the foot of the execution stake, where he was trusted with the care of Jesus' mother. He's also the one who, out of sheer eagerness, flat out outran Peter as they sprinted to investigate the empty tomb. Section 3. The Ministry Timeline. For someone who's so focused on emotion and personal connection, John was actually a remarkably precise record keeper. If you look at this breakdown of chapters 1 through 9, you can see how methodically he anchors events around annual Jewish festivals. This isn't just a random collection of stories. It is a carefully, meticulously sequenced chronology. He really acts as a timekeeper for us. By explicitly signposting the narrative through these sequential Passovers and festivals, running straight from 30 CE through late 32 CE, he provides the exact historical markers that scholars still use today to figure out the multi-year duration of Jesus' ministry. We start around the Passover in 30 CE, jump to the Passover in 31 CE, then to 32 CE where the 5,000 are fed, and on to the Festival of Tabernacles later that same year. And following this strict timeline, John traces the geographic movements step by step through a series of progressive encounters. It's almost like we're on a road trip with him. He takes us from a wedding in Cana, down into Samaria for a really profound theological conversation with a tired woman at a well, back up to Galilee to heal an official's son, and over to the Sea of Galilee. He strikes this perfect balance between highly public miracles and those quiet, intimate dialogues we mentioned earlier. Section 4. Betrayal, Death, and Resurrection. After covering over 3 years of history, the narrative pace suddenly just slams on the brakes. From chapter 13 onward, John becomes hyper-focused. He dedicates a massive portion of his writing to just the final few days, the parting council, the trial, and the ultimate climax of the resurrection. We are zooming in on a completely microscopic level here. Because of this unique focus on intimacy, we get a profoundly detailed account of that final Passover meal.
We aren't just told they sat down and ate. We actually see Jesus washing his disciples' feet in this powerful lesson of humility. We feel the tension when he identifies Judas as his betrayer. He introduces a new commandment to show Christ-like love, promises the Holy Spirit as a helper, and then, in chapter 17, we get Jesus' prayer on behalf of his disciples. And actually, fun fact, that's the longest recorded prayer to his Father in the entire biblical canon. Following that meal, John provides a horrifying first-hand eyewitness account of the trials. He details the shuffling from the chief priest Annas over to the Roman governor Pilate, the brutal scourging, and the execution at Golgotha. But even in this incredibly dark moment, John's personal lens stays intact. He uniquely records how Jesus, while in absolute agony on the stake, specifically made sure a caretaker was provided for his mother Mary.
But the text doesn't end in heartbreak. It transitions into pure awe. John carefully records these highly specific post-resurrection encounters. We get the poignant moment when two angels and Jesus appear to a weeping Mary Magdalene. We see Jesus appearing right behind locked doors to his disciples. We experience that incredibly human moment where Thomas's deep doubts are completely erased, and a beautiful final scene in Galilee where Peter offers a threefold affirmation of his love for Jesus.
Section 5. The historical evidence. So how do we actually know this ancient document survived antiquity intact? Well, check out the Rylands Papyrus 457. This little fragment contains verses from chapter 18 of John's Gospel, and scholars consider it to be the oldest existing Greek manuscript of the Christian Greek scriptures. It dates all the way back to the first half of the 2nd century. What's truly mind-blowing is that this was found in Egypt. That means copies had traveled from Ephesus all the way to Egypt so incredibly fast that it proves the text was circulating rapidly right after John himself penned it. And as for why he wrote it, John definitely doesn't leave us guessing. He states his thesis loud and clear right here in chapter 20, verse 31. He explains that everything he curated, all those intimate dialogues, the unique miracles, the meticulous timelines, it was all entirely designed to inspire belief that Jesus is the Christ and that readers might have life by means of his name. Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. Considering that this deeply intimate, uniquely detailed eyewitness account preserves historical dialogues and events found absolutely nowhere else, a full 90% unique material, what new insights might you discover if you read the source material for yourself? It is a text that has fundamentally shaped human history, and diving into its unique perspective just might reshape your own understanding of it. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving into those sources.